Namaskar. Welcome to P Guru's Prime Time. I am Sri Iyer, your host, and with me is Abhijit, call me God, Iyer-Mitra. Abhijit, welcome to P Guru's channel. We have a lot of questions to go over, but before we do all that stuff, let's take a quick look at what is playing out in Afghanistan and your take on what has been happening. Was there a deal made between Ghani and the Taliban forces that the Afghan problems are going to be contained and solved amongst the Afghanis? Is that how you are seeing it? A lot of stuff is happening. Every minute something is changing. Your take on what is happening, sir?
First, most importantly, veil, vetri veil.
Veil, vetri veil.
Now, if you read the document signed between the US government and the Taliban, it goes on referring to the Taliban as the Islamic Emirate not recognized by the United States, referred to as the Taliban. That is the official designation given. But in the last paragraph, which is the most operative part, it says that America, as long as the Taliban does not allow Afghan soil to be used against America or its allies, America will not interfere in the internal affairs of Afghanistan. Which means they basically told the government, we will neither supply you with arms, nor will we supply you with ammunition, nor will we supply you with squat. Right? So no wonder then Ghani made a deal with the Taliban. Because even if you note, the so-called American air support provided was pathetic. It was one B-2 and 2 or 3 drones at best. So it wasn't a case of the Afghan forces losing or the Taliban winning. It was very simply a case of Ghani saving his own ass, Ghani and all the provincial governors saving their own ass, signing on a deal and running away.
Now, question that is in the minds of many viewers is that Ghani's helicopter wouldn't take off because he had so much money. He had to offload some before he could take off that helicopter. So where do you think he's eventually headed? UAE or US?
No, he's in the UAE. The US isn't like, the US didn't want to give, for a long time, they didn't want to give the Marcos and the Shah refuge in America. Once a dictator is done, America has no use for them. So he is sitting in the UAE where his nephew is. His nephew owns a Gulfstream G500. Which costs something like $85 million upwards if you exercise all options. The bare bones one costs about $70 million. When you start putting in all the seats and the gold faucets and whatnot, gold toilet and 24 karat gold toilet and whatnot, it goes up to $85-90 million. So all his dirty money is stashed there, and the fellow is such a greedy bugger. Even when he was leaving, he was taking tens of millions of dollars with him in cash. And it was so heavy that he had to actually throw things into the drainage pipe. The Taliban have recovered 2 stashes of $800,000 and $200,000, totally $1 million. Now I can do with $1 million. I don't know about you, but I'm not the type that's just going to throw it to lighten the load of my truck or whatever into a drainage pipe.
So true. So, okay, let's jump into the questions now. And the first question is from Varun Arya. Merkel recently said that domestic politics are partly the reason for USA's hasty withdrawal. What could she be pointing to?
She's pointing to a lot of things. One is Trump's own this thing to withdraw. But number 2, it is also the queering of the pitch done by Biden. Because see, the more you stay, he is so focused on his deal with Iran, on getting the so-called Iran nuclear deal back. He didn't want this source of tension. And remember, American troops being in Afghanistan will constantly be a source of tension with Iran. So even the protections that, Trump had promised the government and foreigners and things like that, he just wanted to run out very, very quickly. So this was like pure one-upmanship, not thought out. If you look at the kind of cacophony that's happened in America, the defense secretary is contradicting the president, who's contradicting the secretary of state, who seems clueless about everything. And, Antony Blinken has quite a reputation for mediocrity, like most of DC think tankers do. So it is what it is.
So what do you see play out? Why are the Taliban not allowing people to flee their country? What is the problem there?
No, they are allowing people to flee.
Hmm.
They want to check and see if anybody. So even though they've announced a general amnesty, the thing is, I have had friends in the last few days who were quite high up in Afghan intelligence who were allowed to leave. When the Taliban came and took over Kabul, they knocked on their door and they said, "Look, we know who you are. We're not going to give you trouble. You just shut up and no coming out protesting and all that crap. You keep out of our way, we'll keep out of your way." They applied for visas. They have, I don't know if it was a visa or a exit, whatever. They have, in fact, been evacuated. So, it's they are allowing people out. Some people, I reckon, they are selectively picking up when they attempt to leave. Which I think was going to be a foregone conclusion. This is a disaggregated group of goat herders. Forget about discipline or anything like that.
Now, moving forward, why would the Taliban not want the intelligence people? They are just people gathering intelligence. Why would they want to let them off? I mean, they can serve the country, right?
They can, but it's one of those things that the Taliban seem to have decided is bad optics and bad PR for now. A lot of people, they've said you stay back. Well, they've not said you stay back. They said come back to work and things like that. A lot of my friends have, in fact, gone back to work. A lot of them are too scared because they think it's a trap where we will all be exposed. Like, let 1,000 flowers bloom. You know what Mao Zedong did, saying all criticism okay. And when they came out and criticized, he had them all executed. So, things like that. So there is a lot of worry. But there is a huge brain drain happening. But, I'm not worried about it per se because whatever brain drain that happens, these were people that were never going to get accommodated into the new Afghanistan anyway. So it was a fundamental incompatibility. On the other hand, you see it as people who have, a chance of getting rehabilitated, like Abdullah or Hamid Karzai and people like that, who are staying back. They're under house arrest of some sort, but they're staying back. They're allowed full freedom of communication. I've spoken to some of them. They're allowed full freedom of communication and things like that. Even they are allowed to go out. The thing is, the Taliban says, look, boss, if you're trusting us with security, allow us to provide you with that security advice. So let me put it this way. Very surprisingly, the Taliban this time round isn't as bad collectively as they were the last time round.
Now, I've got the map of Afghanistan up there, and you probably can see it too. The next question is about the Northern Alliance that is now trying to put up a fight. Is this a real fight, or is it something where Ahmad Massoud is trying to find a way to get some respectable post in the new government that's going to be formed, probably by the Taliban?
I don't know about Ahmad Massoud, but I can tell you Amrullah Saleh will never compromise. Okay, because his wife was tortured and things like that by his sister was tortured by the Taliban and things like that the last time round. He is not going to compromise. He is very adamant about it. He will not compromise. My only worry is, see, the Panjshir Valley is easy to defend. I think if you go on my Twitter timeline, you'll see a lot of pictures that I've posted of the Panjshir Valley. You have to get through it. Going from Kabul to there, you have to go through the Salang Pass. And, even the Soviets couldn't capture it. So, even now, when you go in there, you literally see hundreds and hundreds of tanks that were destroyed trying to enter the Panjshir Valley. The problem is, you also can't be very effective outside the Panjshir Valley, right? So you can't come out and stage a major offensive outside the Panjshir, because the Panjshir can only sustain X number of people. It's not a very high productivity valley, but you get lots of fish. There is lots of fertile ground out there. So you can grow quite a bit to sustain things locally. You can have a completely localized economy in the Panjshir Valley. It is not narrow enough to prevent air supply. Aircraft can, in fact, go in there and land in there in certain circumstances and resupply. The question is, who's going to resupply? My worry isn't about the food and things, it's where are the arms and ammunition going to come from once they run out. Once upon a time, Pakistanis would do clandestine runs and airdrop, paradrop supplies into the Panjshir. This time, who's going to do the airdrop and paradrop and things, airdrop, same thing, out there?
Viewers, if you are wondering when your questions are going to ask, we are going through some of the questions that were not answered from the last week, and we are going to run through those, and then we'll come back to your questions. So stay on. We are taking all your questions. So here we go to the next question. Shax Ming wants to know, what are the ramifications for India in the short and the long term?
Well, look, the short-term ramification is we don't have points of contact with the Taliban. All right. So we don't know what's happening. I think evacuating our embassies out there was a decent idea, but they now need to go back immediately. Because the last thing you want to happen out there is for China or Pakistan to gain more of a foothold than they already have. The Taliban have already said that India is free to resume all its developmental projects and things like that out there. I think we need to go back there because it will also hold the Taliban to a certain set of agreed cooperation and things like that. But more importantly, once you're there, because India was there in every one of the 37 provinces. With Taliban protection, you can also, each one of those assets is an intelligence asset. The primary function of a diplomatic mission is intelligence, seeing what's happening on the ground and relaying information back. So those things act as an advanced early warning system, almost like an AWACS in the air. They act on the ground, number one. Number two, there will be people within this movement who are viciously anti-India, even though the overwhelming majority of the Taliban absolutely detest Pakistan. Pakistan is going to be the next target. By this time next year, you will see a lot of Chinese engineers getting blown up. They're already being blown up, left, right, and center. But you'll see a lot more. You will see a lot more attacks on CPEC and things like that. You will also see a strengthening of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Now, Pakistan is trying to get some of its trusted members in the Haqqani network positions in government. From the looks of it, it's not really succeeding, right? Because Mullah Baradar seems to have some kind of control over it. So there might be an intra-Taliban war as well. Like you saw between the Mujahideen, who went after they got rid of the Soviets, they weren't able to govern the country themselves, which is why the Taliban came up. So there is this problem as well. The bigger problem is that the few anti-Indian Taliban, the Kattarpanthi Islamists, so to say, they now see that this is one, and they are going to be taken over and deposited in Kashmir. So that is where we need to keep our eyes and ears open.
The next question was actually asking that very question. Shailesh Latkar, I think Abhijit has already answered your question. Let's go to the next one. Chaitanya YSK. Abhijit, I'd like to understand Pakistan. Can you recommend any book for me to start?
There's no one book, boss. It's more about, reading. Start with all three of Hussain Haqqani's books to understand how it works. Socially, read Anatole Lieven. Remember, Anatole Lieven is completely compromised. Pakistan, a difficult country, that's his book. He was paid it was the biggest apologia of Pakistan on earth. But, he was paid by giving free first-class tickets to and from wherever he was working at the time. He was taken hunting in Pakistan's wilderness and things like that. So, but you need balance. So to check both sides, the politics and the social dynamics, read both these books. It's a starting point. There's a lot more, of course, but that's a lot in journal articles and things like that.
Siddharth Kale wants to know, what does Abhijit think of Gaurav Pradhan's analysis of Indian and international politics?
I never listen to Gaurav Pradhan. I don't take him seriously.
Hardik Thanki, National Open School has military studies and military history subjects. Do you know if they are good enough for students of military matters? Any Indian university offers a distance learning degree in military subjects.
No, if you're studying military subjects, don't do it in India. Go outside. The problem is it tends to, in India, military subjects, they tend to be extremely banal. Go outside and study it. But remember, even when you are studying, more than the study, it is your interaction with foreign militaries, be it in France, be it in Sweden, be it in America, wherever, that matters. So it's also the personal relationships you build up that will teach you a lot more than what's in your books.
And Biswajit Swain wants to know, can the Taliban use Afghan Air Force? What are the implications if they do use it?
It depends on how many Afghan Air Force pilots are remaining. Because, building up an Air Force, you can buy equipment, but building up the training and things like that takes a very long time. Now, the question is, what exactly are they going to use the Afghan Air Force for? Because Iran isn't attacking them. Pakistan isn't going to attack them. So what will they use it for? Maybe bombing the Panjshir? Yeah, sure, quite possibly. But it will need a lot of training. And even if you've got the pilots, you're still going to need ammunition and things like that, which is not going to be very easy to source when the Taliban doesn't have international recognition. So, even for the Tucanos and things like that, you need certain kinds of equipment, which would be very specifically only mated to that particular plane, because, every bomb needs certain modifications. So there are significant limitations on what the Taliban can do, even if you see them capture aircraft, even if you see them being able to rudimentarily fly aircraft.
Next question from Bharat Konda. Where does Abhijit invest his money?
I'm not telling you.
Okay, no, that's fine. Himanshu, will Modi fall for the publicity carrot of escaping foreigners?
Are you kidding me? Of course not. It's one of those things that is going to be milked for its PR. And is he going to help foreigners? Well, there's apparently something big in the books in the works between America and India. Let's see. I think it'll be announced sometime next week. But basically, it's like this. If New York Times' journalists want evacuation from Afghanistan, it will be an Indian airbase or Indian territory that will be used, because Qatar really doesn't want any Afghans on their soil.
And Pravar Chaturvedi wants to know, I'm seeing a lot of Indian Muslims rejoicing over Taliban takeover in social media. How do the majority of Indian Muslims react to the Taliban thing?
If you want to look at a majority reaction, you're not going to see it. So it's really impossible for me to gauge, because I can only talk to 2-3 people or see certain reactions on Twitter. So it's not a very accurate gauge of things. I suspect it's a bit of a 70-30 ratio. 20-30 would be celebrating, 70-30 would be like, ab kya hua? It's one more reason to demonize us and victimize us or whatever. So, that's, I guess. This isn't even an educated guess. This is just based on my friends. But remember, if you're Muslim and my friend, you're pretty damn liberal. You're a kind of a pork-eating Muslim. So it's not a realistic gauge.
Hemant wants to know, is it true that Trump offered a deal to India to take over Afghanistan and in return take any kind and number of weapons from the USA?
No. A throwaway statement at best, if at all. I don't think that offer was even properly discussed, but no.
Jaykumar Khote wants to know, there are many things wrong with the BEAN, but why do you hate Black Adder? The two are like day and night.
BEAN?
Yeah, bean. Like in
Mr.
beans.
Bean.
Yeah.
There's nothing about Blackadder or Bean that is remotely cranial. It is just meant to be the facial expressions of Rowan Atkinson. And, I really couldn't sit through Blackadder either. I know a lot of people who don't like Mr. Bean who like Blackadder, but I don't. It's just never spoken to me. It's a very low level, unintellectual humor. It's almost like American humor, which is the worst kind of humor. Well, it's the second worst after Indian humor.
Suyesh Shinde wants to know, Taliban is actually a student teacher organization. The founder of Taliban was also a student. I mean, what exactly is the relationship between being a student and wanting to impose Sharia? Is that a student of Sharia? What is it that the the founding principle of Taliban?
Look, they just chose a name. It was the name that was available to them. It was, a PR name, a PR stunt that was chosen. Youth for the Youth Federation of India, the youth movement, the radical youth of the world, all that crap shit, eulogizing youth and people like that. Same crap. There was no great significance to it. Because the Pakistanis, they make these names out of their ass within, like, you tell a Pakistani name a new terror outfit. If you actually, this is why they will never run a name a new terror outfit competition in Dawn or the News or whatever, because Pakistanis can just concoct these things out of their ass like within 15 seconds flat.
Next question. Mr. Lee wants to know, will Taliban outlaw bachabazi now that they are in power?
अरे वो तो खुद बच्चाबाज हैं यार. The biggest bachchabazes are the Taliban themselves. It is a
What exactly is a bachabazi? What exactly is a
Bachchabazi is basically, dressing up young boys as girls, underage young boys as girls, and having sexual relations with them. And it's very common in a society. The more the segregation of gender, the greater social homosexuality, in this case, greater social, abuse of children in that sense. I mean, Babar himself used to do it. So, when he's talking about watermelons, what do you think he was talking about in Babarnama? Watermelons don't refer to watermelons. They're the tender asses of young underage boys. If you actually bother reading the Babarnama, that would be very evident to you. So it's a long Turkic tradition. It has been very common in that entire region, in Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, all those places, till they got modernized by the Soviets. Afghanistan did not get modernized by the Soviets, so it was what it was. It remained the same. So it's a cultural tradition. They justify it, even within Sharia, they can justify it.
I have a friend whose father was in the Nazi army, not out of choice, but you had to join one thing or the other to keep yourself employed. And he died within the first 2 years of the war, so he was not like one of those tyrants. But this boy, he was growing up in Germany, and when the Russians came in, lots of tribes came in. He said that when in our house we had a lot of Kassocks, Cassocks. They used to ride on this. He said something like a pony, not big as a horse, but something like that. And they were so primitive that they would flush potatoes on the upstairs toilet and run down to see if it has reached the downstairs toilet.
Cossacks, not Kassocks.
Cossack.
A Cassock is a dress. A Cossack is a The Cossacks have. You've destroyed my pronunciation of that word now. The Cossacks have been have always had a reputation for extraordinary brutality, but they're the Christianized version of The Taliban. The Taliban's a lot worse than the Cossacks because the Cossacks got tamed in the 1920s and 1930s. The vengeance that was wreaked on them by Lenin and Stalin was absolutely terrible. Wiped out the entire culture pretty much. So it's very different now.
And viewers, if you want to know what happened in 100 years, starting from like a little bit before the First World War up until the Berlin Wall collapsing, Ken Follett has written a series of 3 books. I think World Without End or End of the World or something like that. It's a very beautifully compiled, it's a book of fiction, but it's got like 7 or 8 families spread over Russia, Germany, United Kingdom, United States, and France, and how these people's lives get upended because of the wars and so on. It's a good read. I just wanted to put that out there. Let's go to the next question, Abhijit. Venkata Rama Muthuswamy wants to know, can you forecast Taliban's relationships with UN humanitarian agencies like UNICEF, UN Women, UN Human Rights Council, especially embracing women, girl, child, and other children?
It'll continue. They're very good at PR these days. They will spin it and they will link continued cooperation to positive reports.
Ashwant Kumar wants to know, how did Afghan crisis impact Israel, Saudi, and the UAE?
So the Saudis and the Emiratis are worried that it will lead to a strengthening of jihadis, which they thought had been completely crushed to an extent, not completely, crushed to an extent after the fall of ISIS at Al-Raqqa. The Israelis, this has kind of given a lot of strength to Palestinian terrorists. I've just tweeted out the video. You can go to my timeline and check it out within the last hour or so, of Atwan, a Palestinian, London-based Palestinian journalist. And he's saying, we're going to drive the Jews into the water. They're going to swim, and the only home they'll find is Cyprus. Because what happened at Kabul airport, we won't even leave Tel Aviv airport open for these buggers to do anything. So that is what you're going to, that is the fear in all 3 countries, that there's going to be a significant rise in internal Islamist violence.
Shax Ming, impact on Quad after this crisis? Do you see any impact?
Impact on Quad?
Yeah.
Not much. They will continue, but I can tell you the level of disappointment in Japan is massive. They're not open about it because they want to see where this is going. Australia is a bit unconcerned. India is probably the one that is the most concerned about all of this because, we'll be left holding the baby. We were left holding the baby the last time also. Remember when in 89, when the Soviets withdrew, all those jihadis were sent over to Kashmir to start up the Kashmir insurgency. So that is the primary thing. Is it going to affect the Quad? No, because I don't think India's on weak ground right now because the Democrats have spun this thing that we went too close. We became partisan and got too close to Trump. So we're on probation, if you want to call it that. The Japanese seldom do things publicly. They seldom say things publicly. But there's a lot of worry about, they never liked Obama. Obama tried throwing them under the truck over certain islands. And they suspect that Biden will do very similar things.
Mr. Lee wants to know, what products does Taliban would be ready to import from India/other countries as a barter agreement for their rare earth minerals?
First, those rare earth minerals, we need to look at the feasibility of extracting them. Everybody's been speaking about them. But from what I hear, they're too deep and too difficult to extract. So, it's going to require a very significant investment, number one, which is dependent on security. Because, we'll have to wait for about a year to see how this thing between Quetta Shura and Haqqani network pans out. Between Baradar and Haqqani and things like that, how it all pans out, that remains to be seen, number one. Number two, how exactly are we going to take it out? Do you think Pakistan is going to allow us transit? I think not. Iran never let us complete the road from Chabahar. They never let us link it up to the Zaranj-Delaram highway. So are they going to let you do it? No. And especially, they might let you do it had Trump been in power and he was pressurizing Iran, in which case Iran gets very desperate for local friends. The moment a Democrat administration comes and wants to kiss and make up with the Iranians, they immediately forget India and all their other friends, and they, they only focus on America, and then they start flexing their muscles. So, no. Kuch nahi hoga.
Next question from Chirant Nadik. Question to both. Only one dish. Which are some of the best food that you have eaten from Karnataka? Only one dish.
Yeah. Dosa from either Vidyarthi Bhavan or CRT. I prefer Vidyarthi Bhavan. Some people prefer CRT, but Bene Dosa.
For me, it is Bisi Bele Holi Anna. That's like ultimate. Okay, that's right. We can always disagree.
This is proof that Shri has very bad taste. See, in Udupi Sambar, they put garam masala. Yeah. Who puts in garam masala into
No, it
sambar?
depends upon what you add. Okay, it depends upon what you add.
Yeah,
maybe the place you ate didn't.
If you're not putting garam masala in it, then you're having sambar sadam. You're not.
Yeah, it is sambar sadam.
Yeah, but
well,
no,
okay.
Bisi Bele is sambar plus garam masala.
Okay, sounds good. IN 080803, is Pakistan's intel and diplomacy much better than ours? If yes, why?
Yes, it's infinitely better than ours. They don't abandon assets. Here, it blows hot, blows cold. Every prime minister who takes charge decides to imprint his own vision, or rather lack of vision, on intelligence. So our intelligence has been completely hollowed out. Like, for example, the way Morarji Desai did a backflip, then I.K. Gujral did a backflip. Modi also did that backflip. Don't forget that. The insurgency that Chidambaram started off in Balochistan, it was Modi that put an end to it. To what end, we don't know, but he was the one that put an end to it. Right? Got nothing in return, but he put an end to it. In fact, we got Pulwama and things like that in return for that. So, it very disorganized, badly thought out, very personalized, not institutional. In Pakistan, it is completely institutional. Even an army chief will not be able to change direction even if he wants to. Right? So that is very important. Number two, with diplomats, it's the same thing. It is handed over. A diplomat's contacts are handed over to his next thing. They are in India, the constant complaint is Indian diplomats don't provide you with access. Indian government doesn't provide you with access. And the name of the game here is access. The more access you give these people, the more ass they lick. Because like I said, Washington, D.C. is all about licking ass. It used to be about scholarship and whatever. Not anymore. So these days, for the last 20, 30 years, you tell me, how does Pakistan, which has killed more American soldiers in living history than anybody else has, directly or indirectly, how does it get away? Clearly, the diplomats are bloody brilliant. They have a very bad case. The fact that they still manage, in spite of all of that, should tell you a lot. Just yesterday or day before, you've seen the interview of that dumb fuck of a general of the British Army.
Please.
What else do you call him?
Okay.
What else do you call him? British Army General, Chief of the British Army, saying, I trust Bajwa when he says he wants a moderate and stable Afghanistan. How dumb have you to be? The fellow needs to be sterilized to prevent this kind of congenital stupidity from going on to the next generation.
Chaitanya YSK wants to know, what are your thoughts on bureaucrats writing books after their retirement? What is your view on Vijay Gokhale's thoughts on geopolitics?
A lot of what Vijay Gokhale wrote kind of adds up to what we knew at that point of time. So he hasn't written anything that I would disagree with. But even if I disagree with, it's kind of validated by what happened at that time. Unlike certain other retired bureaucrats that just completely make up complete codswallop. So when you read a retired bureaucrat book, I have no issues with retired bureaucrats writing books. They should be writing books because it adds to our knowledge of events. The problem is a lot of these books tend to be anecdotal. They don't tend to have a systemic methodological rigor to them, and that's very problematic.
Now we are taking up today's questions. Thanks for being patient, viewers. First question from Sanjeet Kopikar. How successful will China be in making inroads into Afghanistan since their relations with Taliban are getting stronger?
First, that will depend on how the relationship between the Haqqani network and Baradar plays out. Number two, remember, Pakistan also does not want this to happen. Pakistan's complaint is, we picked up the bill for the last 20 years. We were at the receiving end of American anger. We spent all our money, turned our own country into a terror shithole in order to fight this jihad. China can't walk away with the contracts. Initially, they thought that this fall of Kabul and things like that was going to take up to 3 years. Like Hezbollah dying in Syria, a lot of Taliban would die, then they would ask for help. Pakistan would send in its own troops and its commanders and its equipment, and there would be a slow capture of the Taliban and then a slow capture of Afghanistan. And then Afghanistan would would turn Pakistan into a mineral Saudi Arabia. That isn't happening. Now they're going out of their way to prevent the Chinese from completing CPEC in their own country. They are very determined to see to it that they will not be bypassed.
Next question. Can you put up the next question, please? Sanjeet Kopikar again. He wants to know, what is the impact for India now that China and Taliban seem to be working together more closely?
They're not. So wait for another 2-3 years. See how this plays out. Unless there's a major, twist and turn, I don't see this relationship fructifying.
Aditya B wants to know, what are some books that you have read lately?
Of late, for the last few months, I haven't been reading books. I've been reading a lot of journal articles. But the last book I think I read was my friend Sudarshan Ramabhadran and Guru Prasad. They've written a fantastic book on Dalit politics in India. That was one. And the other book was Tuhin Sinha's fiction novel. Both excellent books. If you want, go read them.
And sometime in the near future, Abhijit, and I'm hoping to get Suhail Seth also to review this book of mine, Who Painted My Last Red. So stay tuned. Abhijit and I are working on that. And let's go to the next question. Rajiv Kataria wants to know why America has ignored the fact that it is Pakistan that needs to be tightened, not Afghanistan. And do you think at least now America will put Pakistan under sanctions?
No. If they didn't do it when Pakistan was killing American troops, do you think they're going to do it when Pakistan stopped killing American troops? No chance. I answered that previous question. Remember, their intelligence is far superior. The product that Pakistan offers America is, we will give you intel. And their diplomats run rings around our diplomats more often, not because they are smarter diplomats. It's because their approach to American relations is institutionalized. They bribe, they have personal relationships, they build institutional relationships, they incentivize and disincentivize the carrots and sticks that they use. India is incapable of any of that. We run our foreign ministry like a third world shithole.
Next question, Aero Aditya. Would the US denuclearize Pakistan?
Nobody can denuclearize Pakistan now. It is impossible. They are too diversified, too disaggregated, put in different places, different locations and things like that. Even if they wanted to, even a military like America wouldn't be able to do it.
Next question, it's to you and me. First, let's take your answer. Why the industrialized West has pristine rivers, lakes, whereas India, which considers its rivers holy, have putrid waters? What would be the immediate and long-term solution?
So there's something called the Kuznets curve. Go check it out. It's where your per capita income and human development reaches a point where your well-being becomes very important. Beijing has reached that point. So, the only successful civil protest against Xi Jinping has been in Beijing in terms of air quality, which has forced a shutting down a lot of the polluting things around Beijing. India, we haven't reached that even yet. The West reached this long back. Even today, when you know that a small handful of farmers are killing off through asthma and cancer and all of that, the rest of your Indo-Gangetic belt through crop burning, you are still not able to control crop burning, even though these numbers of burning farmers is negligent. It's entirely in Punjab, it's entirely the rice crop burning. Not rice crop burning, but from what happened in the 80s of planting rice out there. So it's you reach $10,000, then it'll happen. Before that, no chance.
And also, my turn to answer this question. One challenge that India has is its uncontrolled growth in population. This needs to be stalled because there is a limit to how much your existing natural resources can support you. Today, I think we are reaching that bursting point, especially in the densely populated areas around rivers. That's where the maximum population, also in cities. I mean, if
See,
you travel in Chennai,
that's a
hold
different.
on. Just travel around Chennai, the Kuam effect, and then the Adyar River effect, it lingers. Stink is what I'm saying.
It doesn't stink anymore. Like I crossed the Kuam last week, it doesn't stink anymore. They've done something to it. Same with Adyar River, it doesn't stink that bad. They've done something. I don't know what exactly they've done, but they've done it. See, that's a completely different issue. That is bad town planning and things like that. But how do you develop better towns? It's based on greater disposable income where you can tell people, to ensure a better lifestyle, we allow you to build, you're only allowed to build 4 floors. We'll build 50, 60 floors, compress the urban spread, include more services, have a greater green hinterland and things like that. That's a slightly different issue. Bad maintenance right now has a lot more to do with the fact that people just don't care about their surroundings. This nonsense I've heard that Indians are okay with filthy exteriors, but they keep their houses very clean. Sorry, but that's simply not true. Most Indians don't even know how to clean their own bathrooms. When I go, I mean, forget public toilets. Even when I go to somebody's house, I am petrified of how their toilet is going to be. And they will have Mercedes out on in their garage, but you go to their toilet, it won't be as bad as a public toilet, but it's not a toilet I'll ever enter.
Sandeep K wants to know, Jai Bajrang Bali, one more temple dismantled in Tamil Nadu. Is hardcore Periyarism back again against temples and priests? What should the BJP do?
Well, what's the point of saying what should the BJP do when we all know the BJP won't do squat? Right. The temple hasn't been dismantled. The Mylapore temple has been taken over, number one, and non-Brahmin priests have been appointed in certain other temples. The second part, the non-Brahmin priests, I'm perfectly fine with. I've always thought that, there was an ossification. It needed fresh blood, social mobility, and things like that. Because when you have new priests coming in, you will have the incentivization to start paying priests money, which right now they live subsistence level, lower than subsistence level. So that is a good thing. But the temple takeover, Nehru took over all the temples. What has the BJP done to reverse it? So it's, if the BJP isn't going to give the temples back to Hindus, how can you attack the DMK for taking over temples?
Next question, please. Hey Abhijit, Alexei Arora is not half Russian, half Indian. His name is Siddhak Ahuja. He went to school in Dubai and then to McGill University, California. Do you know who he is? What's the question, guy? I don't know. He's just making
What
a
am I going
statement.
to do about it?
Yeah. I don't know. Let's pass on. Rajiv Kataria says, why America has ignored the fact that it is Pakistan that needs to be tightened, not Afghanistan. Oh, no, this is already answered. Sorry, next question, please. It's been put up twice. Can Afghanistan become the next Saudi Arabia or UAE by size?
No, impossible. There is a certain read up. There are a lot of journal articles on this. The economics of being landlocked countries. There's a reason Uzbekistan can partially do it. There's a reason that Switzerland has done it very successfully. But when you have low human resources and you depend on commodities, where your southern neighbors aren't going to give you access, it's impossible. And I don't see Pakistan or Iran giving, geopolitically ensured access. Come what may, we will allow Afghan equipment to go through kind of access. No.
Subramanian M wants to know, Trump has just said in a Fox News interview that he was very hard and strong on the Taliban during his negotiations. Will the next Republican government in USA try to do an Afghan adventure again?
No Republican government is going to have another intervention ever again. Bush was the last Republican president who will invade a country. The Democrats will. The Democrats haven't learned their lesson. In fact, they've learned quite the opposite lesson, that it doesn't matter how much it takes down America, it helps you win votes. So they will do it over and over again.
Next question, can Trump come back? Anupam Vasisht.
Maybe. I think the only Republicans really providing any pushback to the Democrats are still the Trumpistas. Let's see. I'm not too sure.
Vaibhav Chaudhary wants to know, you retweeted Congress's tweet and called Rajiv Gandhi a true and staunch nationalist. As far as I know, his term was marked by many blunders like anti-Sikh riots, appeasement politics, among others. Your thoughts?
Is there a rule that says true nationalists can't be stupid? In fact, nationalism is a very low form of intellect. I'm a nationalist for not because I, have this attachment to Bharat Mata and all of that. I do it because it's economically very sound. It serves a fundamental human and anthropological purpose. But, where is the contradiction? Rajiv Gandhi did many, many stupid things. He did many, many nasty things. So that doesn't make him any less of a nationalist. But Indira Gandhi also did stupid things. That doesn't make her any less of a nationalist. I don't think any prime minister with an absolute majority has made more blunders than Modi. But that doesn't make him a Pakistani agent.
Next question from Subramanian M. Considering the Pew poll survey that says that Afghans are mostly happy with the Taliban coming back, should the world even be worried about their internal conflicts?
We shouldn't, and we should. We shouldn't up to the point that it starts affecting us. If it leads to a vacuum where people like Al-Qaeda and co gain sanctuary, then yes, we should be worried. If not my problem.
Vaibhav Chaudhary again. What is your opinion on the proposed architecture of Ram Mandir? Thousands of years ago, when our ancestors built things like Khajuraho, they were marvels and rather unique in their design.
They were unique, but they weren't marbles. The actual engineering required for them wasn't particularly ooh-ah, because almost every other civilization had done what we did 3,000-4,000 years before we did it. So they weren't particularly unique. We're continuing the same this thing. Was it unique in terms of design? Yes. Is the Ram Mandir unique in terms of design? No. I would have personally preferred something that was architecturally modern and stunning and required a great level of engineering skill. I don't know if you've seen the Matri Mandir in Pondicherry. It's one of those places you can actually get a true calm. we think that doing things like, say, Tanjore Temple or Khajuraho or Konark in stone is very, very difficult at that point of time, 1,000 years back. Today, with machines and lathes and things like that, it takes minutes to do it. So it's no great it's no great architectural achievement. And I have huge issues with replicating old designs. Old designs, if whoever built Konark or Khajuraho or Tanjore had said, I'm only going to do what my great grandfather had done before me, they would have never built those temples. We still seem stuck in 1,000-year back architecture. Congratulations to you. It's a sign of a ossified, fossilized society. India gets what it deserves.
Next question from Suresh Valayaputtur. When will India send back the ambassador to Afghan and start relations?
I think it's already quite late. I personally believe they should be sent back today. Well, yesterday. When, I don't know. This is all the 10-dimensional chess that our Lord and Master, the guide of our destinies, Mana Adhinayaka decides what to do from Lok Kalyan Marg.
And who's that?
Who lives in Lok Kalyan Marg?
Okay, I don't know the answer to that question, but let's
It
move
used
on.
to be called Racecourse Road. Anyway.
Okay, that I know. Okay. Arjun wants to know what would be the strategy to outflank Pakistan, China in Afghanistan? Is this even possible? Will US leaving Afghanistan make China bolder in the Southeast Asian region?
So there's two things that you need to do. First is see how well the friction between Pakistan's own insecurities with China coming in, how best to exploit them. Number one. Number two, our primary game here isn't Afghanistan. It should be using Afghanistan to drive a wedge between Pakistan and China, because that is our immediate problem. The third layer in this is exploiting the differences between Baradar and Haqqani. So there's several levers that you can play. If only our foreign policy wasn't doctrinaire, you would have lots of levers to play.
Now, I read somewhere that Haqqani is now in charge of the security for Kabul region. Is that true?
He thinks he is. He might not be.
Anupam Vasisht wants to know, what do you think about Mr. Gadkari's green fuel initiative? What do you think about him being more involved in Modi's cabinet?
Look, Modi is the man who wins elections and Gadkari is the man who knows how to run government. It's India's great tragedy that Gadkari isn't our prime minister. That green fuel initiative was bloody brilliant. And you have to take his green fuel initiative in tandem with what Reliance also announced. If we actually go down that path, it will truly be a beautiful future a beautiful future if you solve all your problems. But this can be one huge solution, making your life a lot easier.
Next question. Can we not support the Afghan stand on Durand Line?
Yeah.
Ajay Nair.
Of course, we should. Except that we've recognized the territory of Pakistan, which means, see, the problem is in diplomatic relations. You have a dictum. Once recognition of a certain sovereignty is granted, it can't be withdrawn. So once you recognize Tibet as part of China, you can't tomorrow say we don't recognize Tibet as a part of China. It doesn't hold up in international law. This is the same reason that Russia recognized the annexation of Hawaii to America, so they couldn't open up a Hawaiian embassy in America. But America never recognized Russia's annexation of Latvia, Lithuania, well, the USSR's re-annexation of Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, trying to recreate the Tsarist Empire, which is why I think two, not all three, but two of those countries always maintained an embassy in America. So once you've accepted the Durand Line with regards to Pakistan, you can't now go back on it.
Next question, please. Next question, please. I have a question for you.
Yes, question has come up.
Oh, okay, good. Vaibhav Chaudhary, I recently heard about Yeonmi Park's comment on life in NK, North Korea. And since you've been there, I would love to know how it was for you.
Look, it's a lot better than I expected in some areas. I won't be able to live there because in many ways it reminded me of the kind of trash we were put through in the 80s as school kids in Delhi. No cars on the roads, horrible apartments, everything was dingy, broken, things like that. Everything was limited supply. You still had ration cards. For a very long time, even in the 80s, when we were living in Bharti Nagar opposite Khan Market, we still used to get rations. Your ration card was a prized commodity in those days. I don't think you'd remember that, but I still remember it used to be a prized commodity in those days. And there were certain things like kerosene which we had to get from those ration stores.
They were the only outlets. They were the only outlets.
Yeah. And kerosene. Because what would happen is when we shifted from one place to another, it would take at least a month or two before your gas stove, your gas cylinder would arrive.
Allowed to, yeah.
And so, you had to work off kerosene that you got from the ration shop. So, for me, growing up in the 80s in India, it wasn't all that different. Would I be able to live there now? Of course not. And even there are variations. When you go south, closer to the South Korean border, it gets progressively worse. You see a lot more poverty. You go up north, closer to the Chinese border, you see a lot more wealth. People are a lot more open. They're willing to talk to you. They will take selfies with you and things like that. So it's very mixed. There's no one way of describing it. It's a very complex place.
My memories of 90s, 1996 or 1997, we had a branch office in Bengaluru. And in those days, there was an airport that was on loan. Bengaluru flights used to operate from the old HAL airport. And every terminal, they had moving boxes, There'll be, the places are only like 5 slots. And in those 5 slots, you'll have Lufthansa, this guy, that guy. You have to just wait until which board comes up on which box. And then you rush to that. It was crazy.
Yeah. I still remember, in those days, even to book a ticket on Air India, it was Indian Airlines at that time. You had to go to an office, and then you got waitlisted, and you had to keep checking. You didn't know if you would get on that flight or not. There was all kinds of rubbish. I think people have forgotten how the 80s were. I think the 60s and 70s would have been a lot worse. So a lot of older people would have even funnier memories. But why 80s? Even in the early 90s, do you remember you had to go to a Air India office to book your tickets and things like that?
Oh yeah, I remember that very well. Next question, Krishna Bhargav. Mr. Modi announced $1 trillion infrastructure program in the Independence Day announcement. Will this push manufacturing?
It depends on how it's executed. See, optimally, the government shouldn't be spending this money. What we should be saying is, let the private sector do it and do it on a bill to operate. The problem is the judiciary has destroyed any bill to operate options we had because they are so erratic. The way they forced the toll road operator to control the pricing, or they had the the Gurgaon toll road dismantled and things like that. It's unnecessary public money being spent when private operators could have spent their own money and everybody would have benefited. So, it depends who gets the contract, because if it's the government doing it, not too many private contractors are going to get in on there. So, it'll just be your usual incompetent, useless babus getting contracts.
Nikhil Dhavle, due to economies of scale, will China overtake everyone in aircrafts and cars due to the battery technology?
No, surprisingly, no. You know why? Aircraft, they've still not been able to figure out an engine. To this day, why is it that countries which are happy to buy Chinese military aircraft will not buy Chinese civilian airliners? Right? Even Russia was never able to get people, even at our point of closest alignment with the USSR. When did we ever buy Russian planes for Air India or Indian Airlines? Never. So, everybody tends to think that China is getting ahead. It is not. And cars is the classic example. China took over Volvo a decade or 2 decades back, something like that. And since then, they have completely saturated the market in batteries. Okay, there isn't a single car whose batteries EVs whose batteries aren't manufactured by China, more or less. But you know what? All the performance improvements are still happening in Volvo Sweden. Polestar, the battery improvements that they keep designing are done by Swedish staff in Sweden, not in China. So the Chinese understand the how, they don't understand the why. Okay, and both the how and the why are two extremely important components to innovation and technology. So will they manufacture a lot? Yes. Will they overtake? No, because overtake is a function of innovation.
And Abhijit, to your point, even Samsung's innovations actually happen in the Silicon Valley. They have a very active innovation center right here in the Silicon Valley, which is generating and defining the next generation products from a swath of industries that they do. So go ahead.
And it's very important, just to add to what you said, why Silicon Valley? Why are they doing it in Silicon Valley? Because look, Silicon Valley provides high risk loans. Even if you've had 4 ventures that went bankrupt before, banks in the Silicon Valley, as long as you present them with a good business plan, will give you a fresh loan. You won't get that in South Korea, and especially not in Germany, which is why Germany has fallen so behind on innovation in that sense, right? But where it helps is Western, what I call the Westosphere, which is, Western Europe, North America, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Singapore, and all these countries. They form Israel. They form a kind of global free market continuum. You can travel there without visas and things like that between each other, and you can benefit from each other's innovation. Now, you look at the sheer market size. It's 1.1 billion people. The Westosphere, 1.1, it's about 1.2 billion now, 1.2 billion people with an average per capita income of $43,000. More. Apparently, it's gone up now. It's about 54 or something billion dollars. Total market size is about 67 trillion. As opposed to China, which has an economy of 16 trillion, per capita around $10,000. Where is the human capital investment? Because, the more you invest, the more you produce. Where is $43,000? Where is $10,000? Where is $67 trillion? Where is $16 trillion? These things matter. So it is acting as, that 67 trillion is acting as one unified market. That $43,000 per capita is acting as one unified marketplace of humans and ideas. Not so with China. It's the same dynamic between the Warsaw Pact versus NATO.
Next question, Vivek Khandelwal. Is there a possibility of a long-term stalemate now that Tajikistan is backing Northern Alliance? If so, what should India's stand be?
I don't think Tajikistan is backing the Northern Alliance. Realistically, what should India's stand be? We look after our own interests now. Is there any any physical possible way that you can supply the Panjshir Valley? No. Is there any way you can bypass Pakistan and Iran to supply Tajikistan, to supply the Northern Alliance? No. How the hell is Tajikistan planning on supplying the Panjshir Valley exactly? So, no, we don't really have too many possibilities. We look after our own interests now. Jo hua, so hua.
Manthan, if Hinduism ends, how will Indian subcontinent look like? Will it be a North Islamic India, Pak, Ban, and Southwest Christian India?
It will look exactly the way Sudan does. Sudan used to. A civil war between a heavily radicalized Muslim northern majority and a Christian southern majority. Both equally fundamentalist, crazy nut jobs to the core.
Where are the Hindus going to be in this?
In the sea, in America, in Australia maybe, in the gas chamber.
Suresh Valayaputtur wants to know, Sanjeev Sanyal in one of his books says the idea of temples in India was taken from the Greeks. Your thoughts?
Possibly yes. Because before that we didn't have temples. No? We used to go out in the forests and worship out there. The yajnas were all done into the sacred fire. Tell me where in the Ramayana, Mahabharata or anything except later additions do you see them going to a temple? There was never a temple. They'd go into the forest and do all these things. So yes, it was very much, I don't know if it was the Greeks or it could have even been a Persian influence and things like that, a Middle Eastern influence, because they all had temples at that same point of time. A temple isn't really a original Hindu thing. It's a post-Mahabharata, post-Ramayana, post-Veda, post-Upanishadic innovation. There's no two ways about it. Now, a lot of temples will tell you, this temple, the Murti is 4,000 years old. Yes, because there was the Vedic lifestyle where you did not interfere with people who lived in forests, who used to have their own totemic gods and things like that they would worship. And when the synthesis and integration happened, because of the way Hinduism is, it absorbs all ideas and forms. These totems were absorbed in and identified with one god or goddess or the other.
Next question from Venkatrama Muthuswamy. How do you characterize India's foreign policy? Enlightened self-interest?
Babudom, out of sync with reality, institutional mechanisms failing, archiving and retrieving mechanisms failing, blundering around.
Now, if you look at the normal selection process, right, the top rankers are typically going into IAS, and then I think it was, it used to be IFS.
The exam itself is rotten. The exam itself is rotten. It's all learned by rote. Where is the application of mind?
Chaitanya YSK is simply getting an MAIR in Indian University help me on my way to be a policy analyst. Do policy analysts in India get hired by corporates other than think tanks?
Yes, a lot of them do. So an MA in IR would help. If you send your CV to a think tank, it would be more likely to get accepted, yes. But there are lots of parallel entryways as well, and there are lots of corporates. If you're really good at what you do, you meet a lot of corporate people in your think tanking, and it parallelly get absorbed into corporations.
Next question from Utsav. Ben Shapiro says US stopped air support to Afghani army. They had to do Zoom call to fix aircraft, and that is why they were so demoralized. Is it true?
No. It is partially true in that I told you at the beginning of this what the agreement between America and the Taliban said. No interference in Afghan internal affairs means no air support or things like that. They did block whatever aircraft the Afghan army had, the Afghan military had, their contractors were foreign contractors, and America stopped payments to them as well. So was there a certain level of sabotage? Yes, there was. But that didn't demoralize them. It was more a case of a weak third-rate leadership. I mean, just look at Ashraf Ghani. He looks like a bloody pickpocket at a bus stand. Would you trust him with anything? His only worth is, he can swig champagne in New York socialite circles. That's about it. And give you lectures on women's rights and shit like that.
Debashish Chatterjee, looks like India has finally given up on aircraft engine development. Why is it so difficult? After all, they do have a space program.
The space program, there are two things which India has been very good at: missiles and submarines, at least the nuclear submarine. It's no joke for a pre-industrial third world country to have developed a nuclear submarine. It's very different from North Korea. I hear you saying, well, North Korea did the same. They developed a ballistic missile, a sea-launched ballistic missile and things. Remember, North Korea had the second highest per capita income in Asia till 1979. They were a fully developed country. They are today a deindustrialized country. India never industrialized. Now, why is it that we were able to develop a nuclear submarine but not an indigenous diesel-electric submarine? And why are we able to develop missiles so well? Because the missile program and the space program are conjoined. It was a national priority that came under the Prime Minister. It was given a lot of institutional continuity. In the case of aircrafts and things, they were like left to whoever, jo karna hai karo. There was no level of discipline or accountability imposed on those programs. That is why it never happened. Plus, there were a lot of stupid decisions made precisely because that focus wasn't happening. But remember, our nuclear submarine and our missile program also took off only after the American nuclear sanctions came off in 1999, I think it was. Right. So that is when there was a concerted aim to acquire technology. Was it indigenous? We acquired technology, we internalized it, but at least there was that focus. Here, there's never been that focus. It's always been a whole load of bullshit artists and con artists leading the blind up the blind alley.
Next question from Manthan. Abhijit, per capita of Arab countries is high, but still why they have not been able to build progress in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math?
They actually have. The UAE has. Because remember, unlike Saudi Arabia, which was only, throwing money at its own people, it wasn't really investing in human capital. The Emiratis did. And the Emiratis have built a very formidable capacity. A lot of my friends run STEM businesses out of the Emirates, and they're very impressed by the quality even of the local workforce of the Emiratis and things like that. Today, the UAE Air Force, because of the, manpower they built up running Emirates and Etihad and all those things, at one point, the UAE Air Force was run entirely by Pakistani pilots. Today, they're no longer run by Pakistani pilots. They're all Emiratis and things like that. The Emiratis have built it up. The Saudis are now going down that path. The Qataris will also achieve it over time because they are investing in human capital. The problem is Qatar and Bahrain, the population is probably too small and they haven't understood how to do it properly. But other than that, UAE boss is the kind of things I'm seeing with cyber warfare that the UAE is doing. It is on par with a lot of what Western countries are doing. I have Israeli cyber friends who have gone and set up businesses in the UAE in the last 5-6 months. They are extremely happy with the quality that they're getting, with the kind of interaction that they're getting with the Emirati government and things like that. With the quality of intake that they're getting, they thought, they'd have to deal with some idiot of a prince who had delusions of being a great businessman and all of that. Not true. So they have in fact succeeded.
Manthan again, why non-left never talk about Northeast as compared to Kashmir, like recent issue between Assam and Mizoram?
the non-left has a very basic level of understanding. The left is very, very chalu. They think long-term and things like that. They do a lot of theory and groundwork. The non-left talks a lot, usually very low-quality talk. Uh, the, the non-left is essentially people that were empowered ever since 1991, since P.V. Narasimha Rao's economic reforms. So the level of discourse is an extremely low level of discourse. The primary research is virtually non-existent. What do you expect? I mean, you've only got one publication worth any mention called Swarajya, and that's it. I mean, even Swarajya, sometimes, I was horrified to read an article in Swarajya advocating nationalizing. Can you imagine Rajagopalachari turning in his heavenly abode? He'd be whirling like a whirling dervish if he ever saw Swarajya publish that article. It was an insult to the memory of Rajagopalachari. But anyway, it is what it is, and it produces some very decent stuff. But the rest of it is complete shit. Op India, they don't even know how to write. They don't want word limits, so they'll spend the first 1,000 words rambling on aimlessly about God knows what, about everything, about soiled panties to the raindrops falling and whiskers on kittens and warm woolen mittens and bright copper kittens and whatnot rubbish. Julie Andrews kind of shit. And then in the last, I mean, look at average caliber of Op India readers, boss. They don't even read, they can't read beyond the headlines. No? So, but that is the problem with most right-wing publications out there. The quality is extremely low. Swarajya is probably one oasis in a desert. So the right has a lot to do in upping its game.
Next question, Suresh Valayaputtur, Sri AM, AIM. Have you read Upanishads? Pointers on authentic sources or authors?
I generally find all religious books extremely boring. I start reading them, I can't go through them, and then I'm like bored and I move on to things. I've only read the Mahabharata and Ramayana, several versions of it. Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan came out with a beautiful set of Ramayana and Mahabharata. Very detailed. I still have them. It's like, what, 20 volumes almost, no? In the Mahabharata?
Yes.
Amazing.
Right.
But the Vedas and things like that, I nod and yawn and I can't deal with it. It's just one of those things.
Suresh, the books for Upanishads, it's all over the place because you need to know which one of the Upanishads you are interested in. For instance, when I was growing up, my parents made me recite the Taittiriya Upanishad, which was defining more of if you want to become somebody who's a technologist, either in medical, the STEM, let's say, and you needed to recite this from memory, but it was expected that you would understand what you're reciting. Unfortunately, I was only half literate at that time in Sanskrit, but I do remember a lot. And Taittiriya Upanishad, if you know basic working knowledge of Sanskrit, and which all of us do, you need to go a little bit extra to look up the dictionary whenever there is a word that you don't understand. And today, translate.google.com does a fantastic job of giving you the equivalent. So I urge you to just start getting the ones, look at the Upanishad, see which one is the one that interests you or your children, have them start reciting it. Also, reciting Sanskrit, it enables so many muscles in your tongue and in your brain that children actually have a much higher IQ. You need to get the children started, especially in reciting chapters from Bhagavad Gita. They're not very long, 15-20 minutes. Even Taittiriya Upanishad, which is a very, very good thing to recite, only 18 minutes. You can spend 18 minutes in a day. And once you do that, your development of some of the brain muscles and your tongue is much better. Like, for example, today, if you look at people who claim themselves to be, Tamil specialists, they can't say Ra. They also confuse La to La. And so many places, and Tamil is so contextual, and it doesn't have ta, tha, da, dha, na. It has only tha. and you have to know which context and use which one of those four. So precise enunciation is important in Tamil, and in Tamil people have lost that, and they need to rebuild that. And I don't know when that will happen, but they have Tamil pride. Oh, we are Tamil, we are different from everybody else. Nonsense. Half of them have learned bhusa chada hua hai sar pe. It's not brain. Unfortunately, they don't like it when people say it, and I'm going to get a lot of crap on this particular hangout for saying that. You have to go outside to find out how bad you are. Only then you'll realize Tamil, Hindi went down.
It was the same for me as well. I can recite huge parts of shlokas, but 99% of the shlokas that I recite, I don't even know the meaning of. Because we were never taught the meaning. We were just said, hey, recite. And that's it. You memorize, hey, serious it up. That was our lesson. Right? We were never taught the meaning. Or the master used to give us one bogus meaning, which a lot of things when I learn, when I go back and a shloka piques my interest, I'll go back and then I'll start reading commentaries on it. I'm like, oh my God, this was so profound. Why didn't I look this up before? But we were never taught any of that. We were not taught our theology. Learning those shlokas it's very sophisticated and complicated. The problem is, it is taught today like a bloody IAS exam, and you end up being a buddhu like a bloody IAS babu. Because you're just parroting off the Constitution, section 143 says this, blah, 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 blah. It's like, Triyambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivardhanam murvabhrikumi prabandhanat mrityor mukshiyam amritat. What does it mean? No idea. When my teacher taught me this, it was something about cucumbers, how the cucumber explodes and this thing. And I was like, what kind of shloka this is, sir? Cucumber is in raita, sir. How you are having this and reciting all this? What nonsense is I say? So I think when you actually sit and read what the thing means, like, damn, that is so cool. So, it's one of those things. It's poisoned me. That forced pulling my hair. Those days I had hair, so my hair would be pulled. I would be slapped and things like that. It poisoned me against it. So also do it in an environment where you're sitting and teaching the children the context, the inner meaning. This is why that Guru Shishya Parampara was so important. It wasn't just memorizing it. It was also understanding it. This is that story that I love so much, that Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara of Yudhishthira. He keeps coming back saying, I haven't learned the lesson, I haven't learned the lesson, I haven't learned the lesson. He'd learned the words, but everybody had learned the words, but nobody understood what it actually meant. It's like that.
And there are lots of things that you can learn from Taittiriya Upanishad, which is what Satyam Vada Dharmanchara also comes. There, the Guru is telling the pupil who's about to graduate from his school, Gurukul, and go out in the world. So he's telling him what to do. Like, for example, he says, Matru Devo Bhava, Pitru Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Atiti Devo Bhava. We use these things so much, but we don't know where the origin is. It is all in Taittiriya Upanishad. 18 minutes, compact verses, and you can actually understand it once you set your mind to it, because these things find their way in ads and here and there. You have to understand what the bigger meaning is. Very, very profound. Next question, please. DJ Shah wants to know, Indian interest is in passive control of the narrative and situation on the ground in Afghanistan. Staying away and facing them on Indian borders, is it a stupid mistake? What do you think?
No, there is no Indian interest, even passive control of the narrative. Bhai, 7 saal se ye PMO hasn't been able to control any narrative. Afghanistan pe kya karenge? India narrative itself, they're not able to control. The kind of jackasses you have running social media or whatever, what they haven't done for 7 years with respect to India, they're going to do with Afghanistan. Nothing's going to happen, boss. And staying away, what options do we have? People seem to think that this major superpower that can project power and geography doesn't matter. We've got Pakistan in between. We've got a few 100 kilometers of Pakistan in between. Even in the north, where you allegedly have a border, you don't have a border. There's about 150 kilometers of Pakistan in between. So what are you going to influence? You can't influence squat. You can't even influence government formation in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. What are you going to influence in Afghanistan?
Next question, please. This question is incomplete. Can you, Prasun Shukla, as I believe Afghanistan does not recognize Durand
I've
line.
answered this.
Yeah, we
I've answered
this.
There's going to be a pretty big refraction now onto Pakistan. You're going to see Pakistan, well, let's just say societal violence in Pakistan is going to go through the roof.
Next question, please. Anshul Kumar wants to know, hello Abhijit, do you think American pullout from Afghanistan was an intended move in a bigger geopolitical game to contain Taliban?
No. It was, it could have, had it been made that, you'd have seen a lot of telltale signs in how the Haqqanis and Quetta would have been managed. We're not seeing any of those telltale signs. This was pure fatigue and living up to American domestic political aspirations.
Next question, please. Bunty Nefstar. Is it that easy to cross POK and enter into JK compared to 90s, keeping Taliban into the context?
It's tougher, but it's not undoable. It's some concentrated shelling here and there and wire cutting and things like that. It's still eminently possible. Remember, they don't even have to come through Kashmir. Even now, what if they just come in boats into Gujarat, into some part of the Rann of Kutch, and get some local chap to drive them all the way to Kashmir? Kaun rokega?
It's very difficult.
Never think linear. Your enemy always finds it easiest to do what you think he cannot do.
Jikesh Doshi. Abhijit, please let us know how bad an influence was Meera Sinha Bhattacharya on Indian Foreign Service.
Who?
Meera Sinha Bhattacharya. Who? I don't know.
No idea.
No idea. Next question, please. Ankit Kaushal, what do you think of Osho and his discourses?
Fun anecdotes. That's about it.
They're very, very funny. I mean, let's go on, and we don't have time. Ravindra Zore, do India need to support Amrullah Saleh?
Optimally, yes, but what are you going to get out of it? It's a lost cause.
All right. And is that the last question, Sachin? Looks like it is the last question. And we actually finished it in 90 minutes. Thank you, Abhijit. And we will be back again next week. And Vetrivel Veeravel.
Veil, Vetrivel. Thank you. I hope it was fun for all of you.
Absolutely, it was. And I think we covered a lot of new ground that perhaps was not covered in elsewhere. So thank you very much, Abhijit.